Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the RTI Speed Tips with Bob and Chad, episode number 50. Starting off the year with episode number 50. Happy New Year to everybody and welcome to 2022. What's going on at Wehrs Machine?
Oh, we're trying to stay warm, man. It's been winter the last week here, so below zero, and no, we're busy. It's been a good start to the year so far, and we're busy prepping for our next event. We're leaving Wednesday morning, heading to the Chili Bowl, so gonna go down and do their trade show there, and see some people and debut our new catalog there. So we're excited about that. The catalog will be going in the mail, so you should, if you've ever been a customer here, you should get a catalog in the next week, hopefully in your mailbox. So excited to get that, our 2022 catalog out. We're a little bit behind schedule, but it was a complete revamp. Nicole and Landon did a very good job. We changed basically every single page, the backdrop on every page, and it's pretty wild. It's our best yet. So we're excited for everybody to take a look at that, see the new products, and we're excited to get to Oklahoma again. It's been 27 years since I've been to Tulsa. My little brother ran the shootout portion of it when we were racing flat carts. So excited to get back down there, see some great customers and friends, and see what we can do down there.
Well, awesome. And you also have a show coming up in February. You want to tell us about that again?
Yep, February 19th at the Mayo Civic Center. We're trying to get some some vendors together to get a trade show going there. Us and Kevco are working on that, so we're trying to get the details rolling on that and get some people signed up and see what we can accomplish in a regional show here in Rochester. So stay tuned for the details on that in the next coming weeks.
Awesome. Well, that would be a good thing. They just had that swap meet that Billy Davis does last weekend, and I forgot all about it. I was going to go down there just to walk around and shoot the bull with people, and I completely forgot about it. I got caught up in a couple of basketball games on TV, and then the football game was on Saturday, and I forgot all about that deal. Then I seen it on Facebook Sunday, and I'm like, dang. I knew there was something I wanted to do this weekend, and I forgot all about it. So I apologized to Billy. I wanted to go down and see what those guys how things were going on. Sometimes you get caught up in this being out of sight, out of mind thing, and so you just got to go out. And the weather was pretty decent here. I think it got up to 22 degrees on Saturday, so it wasn't super cold, and not like what you had and what we had last week, that zero with a wind chill of 25, minus 25. Those couple days, I was thinking, and then I was talking to a couple guys in North Dakota, and I was really feeling bad about how cold we had it until I got to talking to those guys. They had negative 25 degrees without the wind chill and 8 inches of snow, and I'm thinking, well, I guess I can put up with what we have down here. I'm fine. I won't complain about it. Take the dog out and tell him, in the first 50 feet, hey, bud, you got to get your business done because I'm not taking a long walk here today.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, everything's been going good. We've been super busy. We've got the guys working a little overtime because we're kind of behind on some chassis stuff and some new cars we're behind on. So we've been super busy. And shock room, people are starting to get their shocks in, which, this is the time of the year to get that stuff done. So, don't wait till the last minute, because then all of a sudden enough people wait till the last minute that we can't do quite as quick a service as we normally would like to have. And, in this time of the year, people are sending their sets in. So when you get an order in, it's usually 5, 6, 7 shocks rather than just one to be repaired. So it does take a little bit longer. But anyway, so no, that's been good. And it's been really, I can't complain whatsoever. Everything's been going good.
First school this week?
First school this week. The RTI 2-link school. is sold out. We sold out today. 65 people, and that's max that we can fit in our building and be reasonably comfortable. And so that's really cool. It's still available online. And those of you who might be still interested in the school, you can go to www.racetechinfo.com/online-schools. And there's still plenty of room left in that in case you wanted to be involved with the school. So that's cool. But yeah, no, that one's sold out. And actually, our stock car school, the 24th and 25th of February, I think it's the 24th and 25th of February, 25th and 26th of February, that actually sold out last week, which kind of surprised me that sold out real early. So I'm looking forward to that. And we're into the school mode now. And so we got to get we store the front end simulator in the shock trailer. So tomorrow we're supposed to have 40-degree weather here in the afternoon. So I'm going to get that out and get everything ready and charge batteries and everything. And we bought the stuff that produces noise.
Cool.
So it should be pretty excited. We kind of updated some things and pretty cool. First question of the night, Paul. What would moving the J-bar to the left in an IMCA mod do? Moving both. Okay, now this is the glitch I was afraid we were going to have. Anyway, okay, moving both the pinion and the chassis mount the same, keeping the same angles, just moving horizontally, say like an inch or 2 inches. Paul, moving that thing a quarter to a half an inch is a noticeable change. I wouldn't, an inch would be the absolute maximum I'd ever even try to move. Because what it's going to do, if you move it to the left, like I think is what you said, yeah, moving it to the left, it's going to get you a lot more side bite on that right rear tire. The problem with that is sometimes you can actually get too much bite and too much side bite where the front end can't keep up with it. And so then all of a sudden the car ends up going in, rolls on the right rear, makes the car very tight. So then your automatic response is going to be to throttle it up. Well, then what happens is that that IMCA tire that we have, it can only go to a certain extent before it snaps itself loose. And then what happens is you get back on the throttle, finally get it turned, and then it's going to be snappy loose on you. So it's going to go from a tight to a snappy loose situation. So it's kind of a fine line in there. I'd try a half an inch. We move, that's not uncommon. I play with that in our sport mods a lot. I play with that, but I only move it a quarter of an inch. And that's just a nice tweak to move it, and it works pretty well. So that's something I would agree with. Luke, what is the preferred mounting position of the Panhard bar on the rear end of the car, not left to right, but how far off the rear end itself? And what are the reasons behind it? Well, as far as the Panhard bar, I always mount my Panhard bar. If you're talking about a quick change, I mount it an inch above the center of the pinion. If you're talking about a 9-inch Ford, I mount it in the center of the pinion. The reason being is because if you get too low, it's going to make that car kind of tight, just like what we had with Paul's question. It's going to load that right rear quite a bit, and what can happen is it can load it too hard, and then you can kind of get in that snappy loose situation. But it's definitely a good fine-tuning adjustment. But like with the Wehrs brackets, we set it there 1 inch above the center of the pinion on a quick change, and I move it up one click on the ratchet. I move it up one click if the racetrack has got a little bit extra bite and it's a little heavy. I move it down one click so that it's like a 3/4 of an inch above the pinion. And usually I don't go much lower than that. And then from the center of the rear end to the rear or to the frame, I usually run somewhere between 6 and 7 inches of rake. I know some guys that have run up to 8 inches of rake. And I think if you run a fairly high panhard bar, I think that rake's not such a bad thing. A little more rake will give you more forward traction as long as it's not. But then you also have to remember, if you've got more angle on the panhard bar, the rear end's going to move left to right more than if it was a little flatter. So that would be my reasoning behind it.
Did you see Matthew's question, the first one, way at the top?
Oh, I just missed that one. Sorry. Matthew, adjustable left front shock mount. What does moving the mounting location up or down do on a USRA 3-link B-mod? Is it like using a limit change? Yes, it is, Matthew. It does the same thing on a 2-link car as it does on a 4-link car. When you can adjust that shock so that it limits the amount of lift that it gets. So in other words, it comes up like, say what I would suggest is about an inch of travel, so that it comes up when the car hikes up, it has to pick up that left front tire, and when it does that, it's basically picking up about 80 pounds. And what's going to happen is that's going to restrict some of the load to the right rear, but it's going to put the transfer of the load back to the left rear and make the car a lot snugger on the throttle. It might take a little bit of side bite away, but that's where your panhard bar down one click, there's certain things you could do to compensate for that, and I think it would work really well. But that's an adjustment that I use all the time. I play with that shock. Of course, and with the modifieds, we can run a chain limiter, and I play with that chain limiter a lot. That's a very nice tuning device. Bear with me here. I'm using a newer device tonight, so my questions, I'm struggling a little bit here. There we go. Casey, I'm wondering how much the OD spring cup can help a stock car with keeping the suspension free from binding. Will OD spring cups the inside of the frame rail in the front without cutting the frame? I'll let you have that one, Chad.
Well, the OD cup, the whole reason behind the OD cups, and I just happen to have one here, is all the springs are based on the size as the OD. So having a 5.5 or a 5-inch OD grab, all the springs are nominal on that 5-inch or 5.5-inch dimension. Where previously, when the ID cups, we have to build that ID cup based on a heavier rate, so it's smaller, because the wire diameter gets larger as you increase rate. So it's just a more consistent way to keep the spring centered. When the spring cup is not aligned on the spring, through travel, then the spring bows, and you get like a clamshell effect. And that really affects the rate of the spring, and it affects the life of the spring. So having an OD grab cup and then also running the Torrington bearing under the max load, which allows the spring to twist freely through the travel, is really makes like your right fronts and right rears very happy through travel, and helps the longevity and life of that spring for sure.
It definitely takes a lot of bind out of the car. There's been times where I actually ended up having to stiffen the spring rate slightly because it took some of the bind out of the car to the point where everything was so free. But on a normal basis, I wouldn't run a car without one, to be honest with you.
And the OD is only an 1/8 inch, not even quite an 1/8 inch over the diameter of the spring. So we've only had a few cars where they had to trim a little bit more out of the stub or whatever, but generally they should fit most cars. Yeah.
Yeah, and if it doesn't fit, I would do some trimming, because it's the way to go, definitely. I wouldn't run anything but. Stefan, do either of your businesses sell tie rod tubes? And if so, what kind do you suggest is best for a 3,000-pound stock car? Straight or both tubes bent with the right front or with the right front one bent? Well, with the stock car, Chad builds, we use all of the Wehrs tie rod tubes, and I think I wouldn't be afraid to put those tubes on a 3,000-pound stock car. I mean,
Yeah, all our tubes are DOM 156 walls, so they're pretty stout.
yeah, no, I wouldn't be afraid of it. And with the right front, nowadays with the travel that we're getting on these right front cars and stuff, I definitely put a bent one on the right front. Um, no doubt about it. Chris, I was thinking winner of the like and share contest for the Midwest Motorsports X Show. Thanks for the sweatshirt, Chad.
Yeah, he won. Thanks for sharing. That's essential for small companies like Bob and I. As you know, this obviously we've been doing this for almost 2 years now, and
Yep.
we need our social media, and that's how we get in touch with you guys and show you new products and like this, our Bob and Chad Live helping you with tech support and that kind of stuff. But you guys liking and sharing that is how we grow our audience and build our brands. So I definitely love giving back with some T-shirts and hoodies, and I think we even gave a code away at one of the last ones. So we do appreciate it, and we thank you for that for sure.
You bet. No, it means a lot to us. We have fun doing this, and it's nice to know that you guys appreciate it, and we appreciate you appreciating it. So that's pretty cool. Matthew, adjustable left front shock mount. What does moving the mount location up or down do on a three? I think
That was the same guy.
Same guy, Matthew.
He repeated it.
I missed it the first time.
Yeah.
Scott, Chad, what all can you do with your new setup plates?
So our new setup plates, they bolt on the car. You can set it on the ground. One of the things we did different is we put adjusters on the bottom so you can set the stagger in the car. And I think that's essential to have the car set up just like it is when you race it. So you can go on the ground, you can set up all your front end, your rear end with the tires off the car and be actually what your tire sizes are. And then it also doubles as your bump steer plate. And it also doubles as a toe plate. So you can check your rear end with it, check your toe, check your bump steer. So it's a kind of all-in-one type plate. So, and we got a little slot on there for doing wheelbase, and we got a little threaded hole that we're going to make some adapters for doing some more cool stuff. And Billy's working on some laser light stuff, and we're always continuing to work on cool stuff. So, but the new setup plates are definitely a nice piece for sure.
Well, and they're a half-inch plate of aluminum, so there's minimal. There's no flex in those things.
1 inch.
1 inch plate.
They're stout. Yeah. Yes.
They are stout. And that's the thing with these setup plates that, you can't have any give in the plate. I mean, the items that you're using to do this measuring, if you're taking the time to do this measuring, you got to make sure the stuff the equipment that you have is capable of doing the job correctly. And these plates are pretty awesome, man. We had a set of them on our show car at the Super Nationals, and they were pretty neat. And I like that deal where you can adjust the plate to compensate for the stagger. So, when you've got a 1 inch stagger in the front of the car, you've got a 1 inch stagger like that on those plates. And I think that's a crucial deal. And that was a great idea you guys came up with. Ryan, in your opinion, how much left rear extended load is too much on a 4-link Wasota car with 80-pound spring? Well, it's really hard for me to tell you what would be too much extended load. When you're dealing with that small a spring, you are, in essential, in essence, you're loading the heck out of that spring to begin with. So I wouldn't have more than myself. I wouldn't have more than 200 pounds of additional load besides what the spring is actually doing, because you don't have a whole lot of spring there either. So I think that's just in my opinion. I could be wrong. Some people might go more load than that, but I'm not a big believer in a lot of binding things. You start putting a lot more load in that, you're first of all, we're stressing the spring to begin with to what we're wanting it to do. So too much, I think, can be an overload for that type of spring. Does the new Torrington bearing have a thicker washer than the original?
So I don't know if you just seen this one. This is our 5.5. So we actually nobody made a 5.5-inch Torrington bearing, so we just had to have them made. But this one, when we first did this, we made this washer and used the 5.5-inch Torrington bearing. So this is a thicker steel washer that we machined. Our normal 5-inch one uses the thin washers that come with a Torrington bearing, and we're actually getting a thicker one made right now. We did have a couple of them crack. We're not sure, but right at the end of the coil, if that end coil has a little bit of a nub on it, it can snap that washer. So we are going to put a thicker washer in our 5-inch and our 5.5-inch kits. But it just takes time to evolve to that thicker washer. But we've only had one or two break in the thousands of bearings we got out there, so it's not like a whole panic situation. But definitely something we're looking into.
Yeah, thanks. Josh says, thank you for building great products, and we appreciate that, Josh. Lloyd, really excited to attend your chassis school this weekend and get to meet you in person. Well, Lloyd, I'm excited too. We're looking forward to it. The weather forecast actually looks like we're going to have pretty decent weather, like in the 30s. I mean, that would be like 75-degree temperatures, man. I mean, we'll be in t-shirts with the doors open. I mean, holy cow. That'll be great. Not looking forward to it, Lloyd. Make sure you look me up. Earl, on a metric stub modified, can you run the soft spring setup like you do on the Chevelle stub? Was always told metric took stiffer. Well, the reason why metric takes stiffer, and I'll explain this to you, Earl. On a Chevelle A-frame, the way where the spring is actually located is to the point where the spring is actually located where it's 60% to the mounting bracket of the lower control arm and 40% to the ball joint. The metric is moved inboard, and it's actually about 50%. It's almost dead center between the mounting or the mounting holes of the control arm to where the ball joint is. So that's the reason why the metric has to be stiffer, is because they're closer together, and to be able to get the same wheel rate at the wheel, it requires a stiffer spring. And that's just a fact of the metric frame, that it's just part of the way it goes. And that's kind of like, the stock cars run, even though they're heavier, they still have to run a little bit stiffer just because of that. Tim, I currently run a IMCA hobby stock, and I think my shocks are overworked. With temperatures at 101 degrees with the heat gun, what's your thoughts? I wouldn't worry about 101 degree temperature. That's really not out of the ordinary. A right rear and a right front can run that 100-degree temperature. When they get past 130 degrees, um, on the dyno, you can actually run a shock up to 150 degrees before you see any fade whatsoever. And with the oils that we're using today in these shocks, they take a lot of temperature and they take a lot of abuse. So I wouldn't worry about it, but I wouldn't, if you start running into that 120, 130 range, yeah, that unless that was on a real rough racetrack, that's starting to get a little high. I don't really know what you would do about it. The only thing it gives is, you talk to your shock builder and maybe he can try a different oil for you that you might be able to use that would run a little cooler. There's different weights oil that we can use in situations like that would probably help. So there's options there. Matthew, how to check a 3-inch and 4-inch number without a load stick on a modified?
Well, I mean, obviously you can do the math. So if you're right front, you have a 500-pound spring and you're traveling 3 inches, that's your load's 1,500 pounds. Really, the load stick, all it is giving you a database of notes. So, and that's not actually true load of the spring because it's not in the center line of the spring. You're actually mounting it out where the shock goes, or some guys mount it next to the shock so they have the shock on there with the bump stop. And so the load stick basically is a tool to help you build your notebook. And so you can collect the data of that 3 and 4 inch number for each speedway that you're at. To do that mathematically, then you would just have the Sharpie marker on the shock to get your down travel, but then you'd have to measure the height of the spring from its relaxed or from its ride height state and calculate how many inches you're going and then do the math based on the rate of the spring. Well, that's going to tell you the rate of that spring, depending on the manufacturer of the spring and the rate of coil bind on the end coil and, how open the end coil is. So there's a lot of variables there. And then that's what the load stick has done for us, is taking data collection and taking the guesswork and the math out of it, because when you're everybody's so close that to find a little bit of an advantage with the load stick and make your car handle better is huge, So can you figure it out without the load stick? Yes. You can always figure out load with the old-fashioned math. Spring rate times the per inches will give you the load of that spring.
And that's one thing too, that people use the load stick. They get depending on how you load it, but say if you load it, if you put the load stick on there just to get what the actual load is, like if you were to measure it like you were scaling the car without putting any load into it, that number is not going to be the same as the number on the scales, because of course out there where the tire is a good 12 inches away from where that load stick is. So those numbers, you can use them as a comparative, but like Chad said, they're a notebook item to be able to compare data to data so you can understand it more, or if I've got this much wheel load on the tire with this particular spring, this is what I would have, because that's what my load stick verified. So,
and you can't hear of a number of 1,300 pounds on a rage car and then go do the math on your car on the spring. Because if you hear 1,300 pounds on car X, that's out at the shock, and you're going to old school math it at the spring. Them numbers they're not going to be even close to the same thing.
Nope. And the thing of it is depending on where the chassis manufacturer has the shock mounts at and the angle and everything, you can't compare chassis A with chassis B. It's all relative to that chassis itself. Okay, Eric, in your opinion, on a stock car, how do you get baseline for lead or trail before or after you set toe? Well, I would set toe, but that part actually isn't going to completely matter. Well, I mean, it does and it doesn't, but I would set toe first. Then what I've always done is I take a string line and I string line my left side tires. And whether it's a stock car or a sport mod or a modified, I always line my left side tires up so that if you roll them, they track identical to each other. What you can do is take a piece of string and I put a piece of tape on the right rear behind the rim, and then I go all the way to the front and put a piece of tape in front of the rim on the left front tire. And I turn my left front until the tire touches the string so that it's basically square with the string. And then I look at my rear end, and if you've got trail in it, you're going to have a gap in the front on the right or on the left rear wheel. You're going to have a little bit of a gap in that string. If that gap, if say for example, and that's going to tell you that you've got trail in the car. If you do that and all of a sudden you touch that right rear before you get the front end completely squared up, that's going to tell you you've got lead in the car. So that's another way to check that. Of course, unless you've got bent rims and whatever, but I mean, providing everything is straight on the car, that's how I always check it to make sure. But your chassis manufacturer should have some settings for you to be able to measure that rear end from the frame, in some way. And you can still use the grease zerk on the lower ball joint, depending on if, you have to find out how the car is actually built, if it's got any lead in the front end or whatever. So there's going to be some questions with the chassis manufacturer, but that string is a real accurate way to know if you've got lead or trail in the car, and you can actually adjust the trailing arms accordingly off of that string. And it's going to tell you that my left side tires are perfectly lined up, and if they all 4 points of those two tires touch equally, my car's pretty straight. We are running an IMC modified with a Chevelle clip. Do you recommend running the Pinto spindles or the 3-piece spindles? Well, I was always a big believer in the Pinto spindles because I like the additional inclination. Well, now, as we've learned more about these cars, our setup has changed. We're running more preload in the left rear and running softer right front springs and things like that. I've actually went back to the 3-piece spindles because they don't have as much inclination built into them. And what I found is the 3-piece spindles don't have quite the bind in the car that it can have with the Pinto spindles. And what I mean by the bind is when you go into the corner and you turn right to back steer the car, well, with a 10-degree spindle, it's going to try to load that left rear. It's going to try to pick that left front portion of the car up and put additional load on the tire. Well, sometimes it can overload that right front tire, creating a little bit of a nose push, where the 3-piece spindles don't seem to overload that tire as much. And I've found that the car, in my opinion, the car has better corner speed, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 with the 3-piece spindles. Or in phase 2, I feel the car rolls the center of the corner better with the 3-piece spindles. But it's not a bolt-on deal. You've got to make sure you've got the right ball joints and things like that, and the A-frames are where they need to be and all that stuff. Because it's not just a bolt-on one or the other. If you go to the 3-piece spindles, it's going to require different ball joints and everything to get the roll center where it needs to be. Tim says he's got 113 degrees on his right rear tire, or right rear.
That was the shock temperature.
Right. That's what I meant, shock. I really wouldn't be scared of 113 degrees, but you're flirting with, like I said, if it starts running, if it gets into that 125 range, 130 range, I'd probably be, researching with my shock builder to see if there is a different oil that we could use. Maybe, I'm not really sure And it kind of depends on how the shock's built. If the shock's got a lot of aggression built into it, depending on how much bleed, it can work the oil hot. I wouldn't be as scared of 113 degrees. We used to run twin tubes at 130 degrees. So I wouldn't be too scared of that. What I would consider doing, though, is if you can put any deflection away from the exhaust, try to keep the exhaust away from that shock. Anything that you can do to point the exhaust outward or whatever so that it doesn't blow quite on that shock all the time would be worth looking into. Hey guys, I recently purchased the 2022 GRT Sport Mod. I'm curious what would be a good starting point for the drive link angle and the panhard bar angle. Panhard bar angle is usually right around 10 degrees. The drive link angle is, and I'm assuming when you mean drive link, you're talking about the third link. Usually we run 15 degrees on that. Stefan, with an original Brin transmission, how much of the yoke do you want past the seal? How much do you want sticking out? Would you know that one, Chad?
That's a Pat Fagan question.
That's a Pat Fagan question. I'd call Fast Shafts tomorrow and ask Mr. Pat Fagan that question if you. And he's got an 800 number. I just don't know what it is.
Unless he's watching, maybe he'll comment.
Yeah, maybe if he's watching, he'll comment in and he'll tell us. So let's just wait to see. He's got a lot of stuff going on right now, so he might not be. He might have missed our show tonight. On a USRAB mod, if you drop the right rear bar on the cage all the way down, what does this do? I'll let you have that one, Chad.
It's probably going to make you spin out. Dropping it on the cage is going to give it a whole bunch of angle on the right rear, so when the car rolls over, it'll probably tighten you up on entry, free up on off. So as all that angle in that right rear bar is flattening out coming off the corner, it's going to wheelbase loose coming off the corner, so it's going to free you up.
Yeah, it's definitely going to make the car free. It's going to be free pretty much everywhere, unless you drop it on the frame the same amount, then it would be tighter getting in, but I wouldn't recommend it. Okay. How can you figure out how much load a tire can take? Well, Brian, that's a great question. That one might be over my head.
Well, I would just tell when you talk about air pressure, you have that video, or you got that tire in the school where when you talk about overloading the tire because it doesn't have enough air pressure in it, it's going to blister the second or third row.
What it's going to do is it's going to take that second one in, because like if you're talking like an IMCA tire or any type of DOT tire, like what we use on our modifieds and sport mods and stock cars, those particular tires, if you fold them over, it's going to make the car, it's going to bow the actual carcass of the tire to the point where the surface of the tire will bow, and it'll stick that one edge up, and it'll just knock it completely off the tire. Load wise, I really I wouldn't be able to tell you how much load it can take. I've seen videos of tires that were overloaded as per the air pressure that they had, where the tire was just underinflated. But as far as how much actual load it could take, I couldn't answer that question. I apologize. But I will, that's a great question, because I actually have a call I have to make to my buddy from Hoosier Tire tomorrow or the next day, and I'll ask him if he's got an answer for that one. That'd be a good one. Vince, our sport mod is on its way down to get front end updated at BHE, and we just ordered all new Wehrs tubes for the rear end. Thanks for doing these live shows, and thanks for building great products that help us racers keep going in circles. Well, I tell you what, man, we really appreciate it, Vince, and look forward to hopefully I'm around. We'll see you when you bring your car down. I don't know when that's actually going to be. I know the shop is relatively full right now, so I don't know what I couldn't tell you what's on the schedule. Right now, I just look at what's not done, not necessarily what's on the schedule. So the boys aren't always totally convinced that I'm always a happy camper because I'm like, okay, so how much longer we got on this project? When's this next project going to be done? And they're kind of working like dogs, man, as much as they can. But they're doing a great job. I can't complain. It's just, I get the other side of the phone call from time to time, and so I have to go out there and ask questions. Rex, I appreciate it. We try to get excellent information. And that's one thing, those of you guys that, and most everybody knows who Rex Merritt is. Rex is got a world of knowledge. He's been racing for many, many years. Rex and I have been doing this together. We were competitors for many, many years. And then now Rex is with AFCO. We're actually teammates, and we kind of work on the same project to get the same AFCO shock out there so that everybody can be as fast as they can. And I appreciate your comments, Rex. I can only hope that someday I can have as much knowledge and experience as you do, because the experience is the key to knowledge in today's world. I don't care what anybody says. Experience, experience, experience. Earl, on a USRA B mod, if you drop the right rear bar on the cage all the way down, what would this do? Also, the soft spring on the metric and the Nova lower, would this change where you can run the soft spring? Yeah. If you were running a metric car and you had the Nova lower A-frames on there, that would basically put it in the same ratio as what if you had a Chevelle lower on it. So then you could run the same spring rate as a lot of these guys are doing. But back to your first question, dropping the right rear bar on the cage all the way down, that's going to make the car extremely tight. It's also going to take, we've actually found that the car actually likes a little bit of angle in that right rear bar. It helps the car rear steer through the middle of the corner a little bit better. And when the angle, we still need drive on that right rear tire. So if we take it too low and we have that right rear bar too level and the car rolls over, then it's actually going downhill. Well, what's going to happen there is now all of a sudden it's pushing the frame, trying to push the frame down, and the tire trying to come up. Well, now all of a sudden we're starting to tote the left front tire, and the car's all out of balance just because we don't have the right angle on the lower control arm to be able to keep it from falling over on that tire and laying the load all on that tire. It's better to have the load on the tire with a little bit more angle, in my opinion. We've had much better luck with that. The car just gets too tight in the middle of the corner, and then anytime you get tight in the middle of the corner, you're going to end up with that snappy loose condition, because the driver's common reflex is going to be, if it's a little tight, let's throttle it up, and if it's a little tight, still throttle it up more, and eventually it's just going to snap that tire loose. And then you're going to be hanging the tail off the corner, and you're going to say the car is just too loose off the corner. Well, actually, it's not too loose off the corner. It's too dang tight in the middle of the corner. It's just not getting the steer. Right front shock question for Eric. I've noticed shocks moving outside the upper control arm area. that the upper control arm won't hit the shock in full compression. I've heard guys running, second here, Eric. I've heard guys running a 9-inch shock on the right front for additional camber gain. Any insight on that setup? Well, I really don't know. I don't believe there would be a necessity for a 9-inch shock up there. You're going to get a 7-inch shock is going to have 7 inches of movement. You can put a 7-inch shock on the car, and as long as you've got 5 inches of movement, you're not going to bottom that shock out. And so even if you get additional camber on it, it's not going to have any effect on the shock whatsoever. You're right. That's a new trend. Putting more camber in the right front, getting that car so that when we get rolled over, and it's all about where you go statically. We got to remember when we get to the point where if you get your car all set up in a static manner, we still need to have 1 to 2 degrees of camber in it so that when the tire rolls itself a little bit, it still has the surface on the racetrack. If we have it to the point where we lose and go to even to 0 camber, I mean, that's not out of the question, but you're not allowing for any deflection of the tire. And so I definitely think you'd be better off. I don't think the shock really has anything to do with the additional camber. Your original question was moving it outside the A-frame. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to remember when you change angles, you're going to change a little bit of the rate of the shock. So just keep in mind that whatever the angle is when it's inside the A-frame, if you move it outside the A-frame with the same angle, it's not going to affect how the shock works whatsoever. Okay. Barry wants to know Chad, if you make a bent tie rod sleeve, are they legal for stock cars? Did you not see them on the website? Did not see them on the website.
Well, I don't think there's any rule that says you can't run a bent one, right?
I'm not familiar with that.
I believe what is the metric center to center? Do you know? I don't know that either. So our 311 SI with a stock inner is, I believe, 19 to, I think it'll adjust from 19 to 20. So Barry, you're going to want to measure your tie rod center to center and then give us a call tomorrow and we should be able to dial that in. But I'm not sure which one it is. But if you look on the website, it's WM311 SI and 311 HI with a Heim inner. So we got 2 different tubes there. We should be able to nail the length of whatever the stock car is. But I think the stock cars are 1 inch longer, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I was thinking that they were like a 19-inch center to center, but I couldn't.
This Stefan says 18, so okay. That would be, let's see. We might have to double check that one to see if we can get to 18, but I can check that in the morning. And if you give us a call, we can certainly work on that.
Okay. Well, we've got 10 minutes left. And once again, I want to remind everybody that our 2-link 3-link school is sold out as far as the numbers that we can have, but it still is available online at www.racetechinfo.com/online-schools. So if somebody was planning on coming, you can still get that, and they will send out the books that morning of the school in the PDF form, so you'll still have the same material that we have at the school. And if you prefer a hard surface book, just give us a call at the shop and we'd be more than happy to send one to you. If you were preferring that, we might want to do that soon. Okay, how would mounting the shock on the top of the rear end affect the car on a 3-link compared to a traditional lower mount? Well, first of all, Austin, I'm not sure what sanctioning body that you run under, but with SOTA and it's illegal in WISSOTA and IMCA. You have on IMCA cars, you have to run them on the back side of the rear end. If the rules would allow running the shock there, all it does then is control what the spring is doing. Where before, if you're running behind or in front, it also controls a little bit of the pinion movement also. So as the car, like if you're in front and the pinion moves backward, or when you get on the throttle, it would actually try to lift and kind of compress the shock and push up on the shock to load the tire. Gives you a little bit more traction that way, but it's still, in comparison, what we would want to do is control the spring, and by putting it on top of the housing, you would control the spring. But like I said, I would check with your sanctioning body for sure, because I know a lot of people have rules on that.
I'm gonna go measure a tire out. I see one.
Okay. Excuse me. Taylor, pros and cons of mounting the right front shock in front of the upper A arm on a sport mod. Well, I really don't think that there's a pro or a con, other than, you definitely, if you could mount it in front, you're going to have less chance of the A-frame getting into the shock. Now, keep in mind, with the steering arm and everything up there, there's going to be a little bit less room, and it's in a crash, you're probably going to bend a shock no matter what if you bend any parts up in the front. So I don't think there would be an issue there. Performance-wise, as long as you run in the same angle, I don't see where there would be a performance advantage or disadvantage. Biggest thing is just to try to keep the shock mounted as close to the lower ball joint as you can, and as close to the ball joint as you can. But that would be my opinion, what I would suggest. On an IMC modified, I have a J bar, even with the pinion. What is a good rake starting point? Anywhere between 6 and 8 inches. I usually start our cars at between 6 and 7 inches. And like I said earlier, I know some guys use an 8-inch rake. A little more rake definitely will get you a little bit more. In theory, it's supposed to help with traction. But the more rake, the rear end moves to the left a little bit quicker. So, it just kind of depends, trial and error thing. But most everybody's between that 6 and 8-inch number. We set our cars as they go out of there. They go out the shop with a 7-inch rake in them. And then I agree with Scott. Whatever your car builder says, that answers a lot of questions, in my opinion. Whatever your car builder says, because he might have different theories on how his car's built. So some of the things that I tell you might not, it's kind of like baking a cake. Everybody can be a great cake baker, and they might bake a great cake with different ingredients, and it still tastes really good to the consumer. But to go about it, you might have to go about it in a different way. So always go off of what your chassis builder says. He's the brains behind the chassis, so he's the guy that you need to listen to. All right, Chad, what do we find out?
Looks like we're gonna have to cut an inch off.
Okay.
We'll work on that.
Okay, Travis, any idea on how to find a sweet spot on the Panhard bar angle, and when racetrack goes dry slick, would you want to adjust it? IMCA Sport Mod. Well, on our sport mods, to be honest with you, I don't if I adjust it, we adjust ours on the rear end. Our standard setup is 3.5 inches from the center of the axle housing down to the center of the bolt of the panhard bar. When it gets slick, we will go to 4 inches. So we will adjust it down a 1/2 inch on a real slick racetrack. Or when the racetrack is heavy, a lot of times I'll lengthen the panhard bar itself out 2 turns, moving that right rear tire out and moving that left rear tire in. On a real slick racetrack, I've went to the point where I've actually done the same thing. I didn't adjust the height, but I moved the whole rear end further to the left by 1/4 of an inch. So that's an adjustment to kind of keep in mind. Yeah, let's see here. We got 3 minutes left, and I think we're at the bottom of our questions. Do you see that too?
Yep, that's what I got.
Awesome. Well, you guys have been a great group tonight. We've had a lot of great questions. We covered a lot of panhard bar topics and a lot of shock mounting topics, and excellent questions. I appreciate all of you who listen to this and ask these questions, because I mean, there's a lot of information that can be drawn from, and like I said, we really appreciate it. We've got one more question, and then this is our last one. On an IMCA modified, what's a good starting point for a J bar? Even with the pinion, or below or above? Quick change. All right, Rick, you evidently must have not been at the beginning of the show. So I'll tell you again. I always run with a 1 inch above the center of the pinion is my starting point. If the racetrack is heavy, I will go 1 notch up. And 1 notch, if I'm not mistaken, is what, 3/8 of an inch?
Quarter.
Yeah, quarter inch. And then when the racetrack gets slick, I will, anyway, as the racetrack gets slick, I'll go a 1/4 inch below that. So in other words, 3/4 of an inch above the pinion. I'm not a real big believer in running the panhard bar real low. I think that creates other conditions that can bind the car up a little bit. And anytime, especially if you're running an IMCA car with a crate motor, we can't bind anything up. We got to make sure we have everything as free as we can. And so, good. Well, Todd, sorry your battery went run out. And guys, I guess my battery's probably run out too. By the clock, it says it's time for us to go. And once again, I want to thank you very much for tuning in tonight and listening. And thank you, Chad, for chiming in here and being on the show again. And we enjoy it.
Yeah, another good night.
All right, thanks, guys. And once again, Happy New Year. And I know they've already been racing down in Kokopah, so we're getting the bug, believe it or not. It's not going to be too many weeks, and we're all going to be racing again.
Awesome.
Thank you.